Hello, and welcome to Rewriting Justice, Authors and Executives in Conversation for Reform. My name is Maha Jawayed. I'm the CEO of the Responsible Business Initiative for Justice, and it's my honor to welcome you here today. RBIJ is an international nonprofit that empowers the business community to advance criminal justice reform, expand workforce opportunity for individuals impacted by the justice system, and build more prosperous communities. We and the companies we work with believe that the justice system should uphold fairness, dignity, and always offer people the chance to rehabilitate and rebuild. A system that focuses only on retribution fails us all, families, communities, businesses, and the wider economy. We also believe that the private sector can be a force for solutions. Business leaders hold enormous sway in policy conversations and are among the most trusted voices in modern society, exceeding both media and government. When business leaders challenge the status quo about the way our justice system works, they open up our collective imaginations for the way our system should work. Business leaders have the influence, but they don't always have the lived experience. They can see its failures, but may not have the personal stories to bring those failures to life. Authors do. Their stories capture the human realities behind policy, and they can open hearts and minds in ways statistics never will. So that's why we're proud to be teaming up with Libro FM, the audiobook platform that partners with independent bookstores to bring storytellers and business leaders together. And that's how Rewriting Justice was born. These conversations spotlight injustice and resilience and explore how businesses can be a force for change. Today's Rewriting Justice conversation falls on World Day Against the Death Penalty. This is a day to confront the cruelty and brokenness of capital punishment, an issue that has been core to RBIJ's work from the very beginning. Some of our earliest work was empowering business leaders to speak out against executions and advocate for an end to capital punishment in the United States. In 2021, we joined forces with Sir Richard Branson to launch Business Leaders Against the Death Penalty, a global campaign that now includes nearly 600 executives committed to abolition. I know there are many business leaders tuning in today, so please stay through to the end so I can share more details for how you can join. But why do business leaders care about this issue? They care because a fair and stable justice system is essential for a strong economy. They care because the death penalty is expensive, ineffective, and unfit for purpose. It wastes taxpayer dollars without making communities safer, and that money could be spent on real solutions that actually prevent crime. And they care about the communities where they live, work, and hire. They care about human rights, they care about racial bias and wrongful convictions, and they care about the botched executions that we continue to see in this country. The death penalty doesn't reflect safety or justice. It reflects a system that's broken, and that's bad for communities, bad for business, and bad for society. Today's conversation brings these systemic issues down to a deeply human level. Our featured author is Jarvis Jay Masters, whose memoir, That Bird Has My Wings, tells the story of his journey from childhood and foster care in the juvenile justice system to fighting a death sentence on death row in California. Jarvis has maintained his innocence since his conviction in 1990. He spent 21 years in solitary confinement, the longest in San Quentin's history, and during that time wrote 2 books. That Bird Has My Wings became a New York Times bestseller and an Oprah's Book Club pick in 2022. And for those who haven't yet read it, the audiobook, narrated beautifully by Corey Jackson, is available on Libro FM. And our first 40 registrants received a free credit to listen. Joining Jarvis in conversation is Sir Richard Branson, founder of Virgin Group. Sir Richard is himself an established author of 9 books, and in 2024, he released his first complete audiobook, Losing and Finding My Virginity, which combines his 2 best-selling memoirs into one audiobook read aloud by Richard himself. Sir Richard has long used this platform to champion justice and human rights. As co-founder of Business Leaders Against the Death Penalty, he has mobilized business leaders around the world to speak out against executions and advocate for abolition. He speaks at events and in the media, and his commitment to the issue is showing what it means to be a justice-driven business leader. In today's dialogue, you'll hear Jarvis speaking over the phone from prison with Sir Richard. We're so grateful to both of them for sharing the call with all of us today on World Day Against the Death Penalty. And without further ado, here's their conversation.
Hello?
Oh, hi, it's Richard.
Hey, Oh, how are you doing, Richard?
Um,
Sir Richard.
no, just Richard, thank you. Um, I'm doing good, but I hear you've just done a 3 weeks of no food. Is that right? You were hospitalized for the last 3 weeks without taking food,
I've been on a hunger strike for
and
almost a little bit more than 3 weeks, yeah, because they denied me all my property and my linen and so many other things that they decided to retaliate against me because I took a stand on a few things, and um, that's how I was able to resolve the issue, was being on the hunger strike.
okay. Well, I'm sorry you've been through that. Thank you for your courage in sharing your traumatic and abusive childhood and your life story, which is extraordinary. And I've spent many years trying to help people on death row, particularly
Hmm.
those people who are innocent, like say Richard Glossip, who's another person who is innocent on death row. And having read your story, I'm completely convinced, like Oprah Winfrey and other people, that you're innocent and that you shouldn't have spent 40 years of your life in prison, let alone being on death row. I just don't understand how you ended up on death row when the two people who actually did the killing are not on death row.
Oh, I think, in retrospect, I think um, the only thing that I'm probably guilty of is not pointing out the people who did it, and I just couldn't face the fact that I was going to put somebody on death row. And it was only when they start pointing the fingers at themselves that I was able to tell my true story and let everyone know that I was innocent. And um, that started a whole nother process of my appeal. My appeal went another way when I was able to get the guys who were guilty of that crime to admit it. And once they did that, I was the only one that ended up on death row because I pretty much didn't want to get a lot of other people on death row. I did not think I would ever be on death row. I never thought I would be guilty, but when you tend to have some principle about how you're going to react to something that is so barbaric like being put on death row, it just wasn't me to look at people and say, hey, whatever I'm going to say is going to put two people on death row. And I didn't. And at that time, I was in my 20s, and I just didn't know how to do it. I didn't know how to point people out, and knew that they were going to end up on death row. And the funny thing about it, I'm the one that ended up on death row because I didn't even say anything. So um, that's a tragedy in itself.
Yeah, I mean and everything I've read and your book and all the evidence just points to you should have been a free man many years ago. I mean, despite the fact that when you were a child you had a pretty difficult childhood, didn't you, with your parents
Yeah,
leaving
it
you?
was. It was. It was very difficult, and I'm so glad that even though my parents, who were, heroin addicts and so many other things, they gave me a chance to live. Back then, and a lot of African American women were aborting their children, and since my mother gave me a chance to live, so many other things that I thought was not, you know, not how to raise a child. What she did was she gave me a chance, and for that I love her, and I've always loved her in a way where it's hard to explain to people, because everybody want that perfect parent. Everybody want that mother who was there for them all along, and that's a beautiful story. But at some point, you have to understand that you know everybody have their faults, and when we talk about drugs make you do some really really bad things. And I understood that as I grew older. I understood how much pain my parents were in, so I knew how to forgive them, and that was just the way I reacted to
What?
years down the line and how I wrote my book.
Yeah.
I didn't, it was just something, Richard, that really, really meant a lot to me to just recognize who she was and at the time what she were doing at that particular time. So it was just,
Mhm.
I don't know how to. I never knew how to hate my mother or anyone else like that.
Well, obviously, hate is something which none of us should do. Forgiveness is so important, and obviously, as a Buddhist, you obviously practice that. The the judge said something pretty awful about your mother in court. Can you remember those words that he used?
And she said that I shouldn't have never been born, and that was a powerful statement when someone looks at you from above and tell you something like that. Um, I didn't even know how to respond to that. I didn't know where that came from. I only knew that it takes a lot of evil to put someone on death row or to send someone to die. And I think when you subject someone to being not a human being, not worthy of life, it's more easier to do. But when you're looking down at a human being, I don't think anyone can ever do it. But so I think what she did was she purposely dehumanized me to give her the strength to say what to pronounce the sentence that she did. Um,
Yeah.
and years down the line, I really, really felt sorry for what she had to do to send an innocent person, to death row. That was painful for me, um, and it lasted a long time.
In America, it's just very sad that some states still, carry on this barbaric approach, particularly in cases like yours and Richard Glossop, where you're both, patently innocent, and that you should not only not be on death row, but you should be one of those 150 people in New York whose case has been thrown out.
Wow, wow. In California where I'm at, there's 500 plus people on death row, and I don't know how the state can say all 500 and some people are guilty. I mean, just basic math doesn't allow you to come up with those kind of conclusions. But you know, beneath that, there's a lot of people on death row who, um, suffer from mental issues. I mean, they mental health and that kind of illness put them on death row because at one point, I think it was around 1982 or 83, the state started dehumanizing. The state started criminalizing behaviors that was clearly something that came from a mental condition. And so you start having a lot of sick people put on death row because they're not addressing the illness. They're addressing the crime. And when I look around, since I've been on death row, I've seen a lot of people who you might see on television with heinous crimes, but I know those people. And a lot of those people are really, really have mental conditions that should not ever be in prison. I mean, they should be in hospitals. But we California tend to try to prove a point with these individuals, with these human beings, to somehow condition people to accept to accept the idea that the death penalty is something that's justified. But in truth, to kill anybody, to purposely kill someone, is barbaric, and I really understand how in Europe, in England, they had stopped it in 1951. I guess they came to a conclusion that um, this state and the United States have not caught up to yet.
Yeah, I mean the sad thing is that you have countries like Iran that has killed 1,000 of their citizens this year. You have countries like China that kills its citizens, and then you have
Oh yeah,
a handful of states in America. And in a civilized country
yeah.
like America, that should be, or a so-called civilized country like America, it should be a thing of the past. Um, has Buddhism helped you get through things?
Well, absolutely, absolutely. Absolutely. I think one thing about Buddhism that has always given me something to benefit from is knowing that, um, it's not all about you. It's not all about me. It's about, how do we collectively find the peace and love we have in each other. Um, and I get a lot from, just being around people that has taught me compassion that are in prison. People in prison has taught me so many things about how it is for me to accept the fact that there are positive things that you can do. And one of those positive things that I was able to do was write a book, and while I was in solitary confinement. And I got help. I got help from a lot of people that really, really understood where I was. And when I became a Buddhist, they were there to lift me up, and teach me how to understand how you could be a benefit to other people. And that's the joy that I have being a Buddhist. I think meditation helps.
Yeah, just for the sake of other people who haven't read the book, I mean, the people who actually committed the murder, they decided that they wouldn't be executed because
Mhm.
they'd pointed a finger at you as the person who they claim made the knife, but it wasn't anything to do with the actual murder itself. Is that a right summation?
Yeah, yeah. You offer somebody a chance to get out of prison if they only tell the big lie, and they tell the big lie.
Yeah.
They tell the big lie, and they get out of prison. They thought they were going to get out of prison. I mean, they were betrayed. Um, they never did get out of prison, but they thought they had a deal to get out of prison. And sometimes when you're facing 30 years in prison, and someone says, "Hey, we need you to tell the big lie, and we'll release you," you know, it's hard to say no for anybody. Uh, and they didn't say no. They say, "Well, when do you want me? What day you want me on?" And that's
Yeah.
just America. That's just how it's done.
We've come across this with a number of other people. I mentioned Richard Glossip, who's been sort of one day from being executed and is still alive, thank God. But and exactly the same thing happened to him. The person who did the murder, had to point the finger at somebody else in order not to be executed himself. And
Right.
it has happened. It has happened so often. It's really really disturbing. The I mean, you've managed to stay so positive despite being in prison for 44 years. I mean, I suppose we only live one life, and so if you're living it in prison, you either have to be positive or you become negative and curl up. But how did you manage to stay so positive? Was it the Buddhism or just your own mental frame of mind?
Really, this is a longer story, but the short story is that I learned how to get along with me. You know,
Yeah.
I learned how to, just learn me and get along with me and find the things about me that I could share with other people and be open enough to be willing to accept the friendships that I've gained over the years. But at some point, Buddhism taught me how to sit down. It taught me how to sit down. It taught me how to slow down my thoughts. It taught me how to, for a good example, when I wrote the book with a pen, the tip of a pen tube. That allowed me to slow down, and write my true life story. And I don't think I could have had that kind of patience without having a center, a Buddhist idea for writing, and it brought the best out of me. It hurted me so bad to bring the best out of me, but that was the case. And once I completed that book, I just had this good relationship with who I was, and I knew that because I had developed this connection between Buddhism, who I am, and the community in which I was living in, that I had a lot of things I could do. And I got lost in those things, that's all I did was participate in writing or helping someone else write or doing things that just years and years went by. And the years that went by, they went by pretty, not fast, but they went by with things to do.
Yeah.
And when you have positive things to do, it just seems like, you think because you're getting older, life goes by real fast. Well, when you're doing a lot of positive things, times go by fast. And it's hard to look back at those years until somebody reminds you and say, hey, man, you've been in prison 20 years. What in the hell did you do? And it's hard to answer that question because you're doing so much that offers you a different perspective in life. You're doing a lot that doesn't stop and ask you, am I going to go crazy or not? You see enough examples of what it looks like when someone goes crazy that scares the hell out of you, and I saw a lot of that. And either I wrote about it or I thought about it or I shared those stories in ways that really, really brought the best out of me. And, when you bring out the best out of you, you're going to bring out the best out of other people around you too, So that was a great motivator, and
Yeah.
I just hope that, when we find ourselves trapped, whether we are in prison or out of prison, you have to find a way to, get you to understand where you are in whether you're in this kind of trouble or that kind of trouble. And I think that's what I was able to do, man. I was able to find who I was in Buddhism and just being a human being and learning how to, care for people. I had to learn how to care for myself before I was even close to learning how to care for other people. So that's what it did, man. And it was a process. It was a learning process. It was something that taught me, that this, you can't just do this. This is a practice. This is something that, you're going to fail at, and you're going to learn better, and you're going to fail, and you're going to learn better. But for me, it was, I try to create the right intentions to do the best thing. They're saying that my time is up right now. So,
Okay, well,
Sir Richard, I wish I could talk to you more.
I wish you all the best, and thank you for looking after all the other people, which gives you a wonderful purpose. And
hey, you know what, Richard, the things you do for people and the way you contribute to this idea of getting rid of the death penalty, that is a lot, man. That is a lot, and I can't thank you, for all the things you've done and continue to do everywhere, not just here in California, but everywhere. So I really, really thank you for being who you are, and the time you give to a capital punishment all over the world. It means a lot. And I just want to say thank you. And if I can say thank you for all the people who's on death row, whether they're in prison or out of prison, I really appreciate you for being who you are.
Well, those are the sweetest words, and I wish I could give you a hug, but I'll give you a hug down the line, and look after yourself.
You already did. You already did.
All right.
You already did.
And
All right, take care.
We'll speak soon. Cheers. Thank you. Oh, how sweet.
Wow. Two people from very different worlds, but in that conversation, we could hear their shared humanity and shared desire for justice. Our thanks to Jarvis and Sir Richard. Many of you here today are friends of Jarvis, business leaders, and advocates. If Jarvis's story moved you, I encourage you to read his book or listen to the audiobook on Libro FM to understand it in full. If you are a business leader, we hope you'll follow Sir Richard's lead in using your voice to drive change. There are so many ways you can leverage your unique influence to advocate for people like Jarvis, and we at RBIJ are here to help. Signing statements and letters alongside your peers, testifying in support of abolition legislation in your state, speaking out in the media, leveraging your brand, and more. If this is of interest to you, the simplest way to start is by signing the Business Leaders Declaration Against the Death Penalty. This is your path to officially joining RBIJ's and Sir Richard's campaign. Your name as an individual leader, not as a company, will be listed alongside Sir Richard's and nearly 600 business figures committed to death penalty abolition. Sign now at bizvsdp.org/join us. That is bizvsdp.org/join us. Thank you again to Libro FM for making this conversation possible. Thank you to Jarvis and Sir Richard, and to all of you for joining us on this World Day Against the Death Penalty. Let's make justice our business.